So by void, it just means completely empty, right? It can sound negative, like something we really don't want to encounter. It sounds like, finding ourselves in a dark alley somewhere, spiritually speaking. But it's one of the words that's often used sometimes in Zen, because they don't want to give you anything to hold on to hope for, to strive towards, anything that might be enticing to the personal self. So a word like void it's not something that we really find ourselves wanting to strive after. In fact, for most people, even people on the spiritual path, we can spend a great deal of time and effort doing everything we can to avoid encountering the void. Right? I mean, all the things that we do to distract ourselves, entertain ourselves, amuse ourselves, intoxicate ourselves, just all the little things, the big things, the busyness, all of that sort of doing anything rather than coming face to face with this inner sense of emptiness. I remember myself, I spent a long time, years, more than I'm going to admit tonight, years sort of doing things, especially late at night, to avoid boredom. Avoid the sense of emptiness. A snack here, a TV program there, a glass of wine there. Years. And then the normal busyness during the day, and all of which has a purpose and may be fine. But when we really look deeply, we can assess for ourselves how much of our life energy is spent avoiding the very thing that's at the heart of our existence. And that is this quality of emptiness. So when we say void, it's good to know what we actually mean by that, because it's not completely devoid of life, right? It's not just a black hole. It's something actually very alive. It's actually the essence of our existence. And so it's sort of ironic that the very essence of our being is something that we will do almost anything to avoid encountering. Right? It's sort of ironic. We'll meditate for hours. We'll go on retreats. We'll read books, listen to, I don't know, videos on TV. Anything rather than actually directly encountering that ourselves. But that's where this leads to. I mean, the analogy that's often used is peeling an onion, layer by layer. We strip away sort of layers of identification, things that we take ourselves to be, one layer after another. We realize that, yes, that may be relatively true. I may be, belong to this country or this culture or this religion, have this resume, have this skill set, etc. But that's not really truly, maybe relatively true, but it's not essentially what I am. And so we can strip away these layers, the more obvious ones first, and then there are more and more subtle ones. I'm a good person. I'm a spiritual person. I'm a nice person. I'm not a nice person. I am ashamed of this in my past. I am fearful of this. There are more and more subtle levels. And so as these layers are peeled away, using this analogy of the onion, we keep expecting to come upon the purified core. You know, my real self, the improved me, still a personal me, but much better than what I am now. And so a lot of people take that to be the spiritual journey. But like an onion, what we come to discover, we peel away the last layer and there's nothing. There's something, but it's not personal. That's the surprise. We are motivated by this idea of an improved me, through this spiritual discipline over perhaps many years. And what we end up finding is that there was something present all along that wasn't a function of what I did, who I became. It was actually something more fundamental than that. And we can call it the void to avoid any sort of desire to attain it. But to ask that, we can really inquire, like, empty of what? Right? Because that's the question. It's not entirely empty, but it is empty of something. Let's say you had a cup of tea, and you could say the cup is full of tea, but when you drank the tea, you would then say that the cup is empty. But the cup isn't exactly empty. I mean, it's empty of tea, if that's what we're talking about, but it's not empty of, well, it's not empty of air, for example, and it's certainly not empty of the space that was inside the cup. Is still the space that's inside the cup. And this greater space that included the presence of this little object within the vastness of space is still the vastness of space. So in that sense, it's empty of tea, but it's not exactly empty. And in the same way, when we look at, look at our own being in a deeper and deeper way, what we find is that all the things that we took ourselves to be, sort of, not that they're not relatively true, but they're not absolutely true. They don't get to the heart of the matter. We can define ourselves by our profession or a relationship or, our culture or nationality or whatever, but all of that's subject to change, and eventually all of that will one day, if not sooner, be taken away. But when we say that what we truly are, is empty, what are we talking about? The void. Empty of what? Empty of the sense of me, personal identification. And so that's what we find. We discover that there's something there. It's just not a personal self. We always imagine that it would be an improved self, of course. But what we find out is that there's not actually a self there, which is surprising, especially when we spend a whole lifetime trying to improve or fix or work out the perfect arrangement so that this sense of self is as comfortable as it can possibly be in this lifetime. You can put a lot of effort into that one. So when we really examine this, just by staying with this sense of beingness, like we pointed to at the outset, just the sense of I am. Before we define what that is or try to speculate what that is, but just the really felt sense of sort of raw presence. Presence before we define anything, go to any philosophical concepts, draw any conclusions, but really just with that felt sense of just being. Being present for whatever arises without defining ourselves by any of those thoughts or opinions or memories or hopes or fears that we may hold. Before we take on any of that baggage, there's just this sense of being, right? And that sense is already present when we stop long enough to just settle into it. And that sense is quiet. It doesn't have an agenda. It doesn't have a history. It doesn't have a set of opinions. It doesn't have a judgment about what you should be. It just is present. And it's not something that you have to attain. If it takes you 30 years of meditation to recognize that that essence is at the core of your being, it's of no additional value than if you recognize it in this moment. Meditation may be good for the body, discipline for the mind, all that is true. But in terms of the value of the recognition of what you truly are, how you arrive at that and how long that takes you is not relevant. So there's no need to postpone that recognition. It's the old, very first Zen patriarchs used to say is, recognize true nature, become Buddha. Very direct. Recognize that sense of being prior to any identification with self. It's not that the egoic self has to be ejected. The egoic self serves a certain purpose because at the end of the day, even after our true nature is recognized, we still are left to live life in this body-mind. And so that egoic structure, although very significantly disabled from what it may have once been, is still the vehicle through which we live this life. And there is a role at times to be in this personhood and to function as that. But the difference is knowing where our true home is as this spacious presence is immensely liberating and allows us to live through this form, as this form, in this life without fear and with a feeling of being at home in this world, with the recognition that what I truly am is not other than everything else. If there's no self, there's no other. Right? This is just sort of the understanding where duality may still appear when we're viewing it from a personal perspective, self and other, left and right. But from another perspective, we can see all of that as appearances within the vastness of awareness. The awareness that's already present, despite our best efforts to avoid it. And one of the best ways to avoid it for a very long time is to seek it outside of ourselves. So by outside of ourselves, I mean in some future experience, maybe an enlightenment experience, the ones we've read about, maybe adopting the right conceptual metaphysical framework that we are impressed with and can feel comfortable with. Maybe learning everything about the spiritual journey. All of those ways of seeking are actually a postponement of the possibility of recognizing what we truly are in this moment. It's already present. It's not that we have to become worthy of it. It's not about that. You are that. And so any effort to believe that it's absent now is a necessary prerequisite to seek it sometime in the future. Right? But if it's your very essence that we're talking about, and it is, then it must be present now. If it were your essence and it were absent, like even for a moment, I don't know, you vanish in a puff of smoke. But we can see from the perspective of this spacious, empty presence at the very core of your being that's already there, that's already what is truly living this life. It's just our belief that it's not that, it's me, I'm doing it. It's just a cultural idea. Me, I am a separate self. But when we go really looking for the self, one of the things that's challenging is that we never actually find it. We find plenty of sort of breadcrumbs from, that we take to be evidence of the self. I mean, there's memories and regrets and hopes and opinions and ideas and expectations and dreams and fears, and there's all of that. But none of those is self. It's just mind. Right? So the mind has a function, beautiful instrument, but when it believes that it is the final judge and jury of telling you who you truly are, it's not the right tool. It's not the right tool precisely because the mind, as you may have noticed, thinks in words. That thought stream, it's actually word after word. It may be a bit jumbled, but it's still very linear in that way. And all of those words are conceptual. And so you put them all together, and it is a framework of concepts that we've learned about ourselves. We weren't born with any of them. And so that instrument, that, I know the brain does other things as well, but that capacity of thought will never exceed its capacity of thinking. It thinks. Some of the thoughts may be very intelligent. We may be able to compose them into very logical theologies that we can hold and believe in. And if that's sufficiently comforting for you, great, wonderful. And I'm suggesting that the mind as an instrument doesn't have the capacity to go beyond mind, to go beyond what is reducible to words. And what is true can never be reduced to words, because what is true is what you are, and what you are is not a concept. It's what you are. It's the truth of your being. It's existence itself, reality itself. And no amount of words by the most literate person that ever lived, by the most eloquent person that ever lived, can reduce the totality of reality to a dogma, a philosophy, a religion. It's bigger than that. And what notices all of those attempts to reduce reality to a concept, even a very eloquent concept, is this capacity to notice all those struggles to sort of pull reality into something that is digestible by the mind. And that's the frustration, because the mind is not the right instrument. And so whatever we try to do, whether it's an experience or a feeling or a metaphysical conceptual structure, none of that will be, at the end of the day, ultimately satisfying. Because what you are is bigger than that, vaster than that. It includes that. It's not opposed to it. It's just not sufficient to describe what you truly are.